A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad you're with me on the program today. We're going to be talking with our friend Ryan Petty here in just a moment or two. Governor Ron DeSantis calling for the repeal of many of the gun control laws put in place after the murders at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida in 2018, including getting rid of the state's red flag law. And in addition to talking about the Post-Parkland gun laws, Governor DeSantis also calling on lawmakers to enact something that frankly is already law across most of the country, that is open carry. Florida, one of just a handful of states where open carry is not allowed. And the most Second Amendment friendly, I think the only permitless carry state where open carry is not allowed, which is just, that's so weird to me that is such a contentious issue in the Sunshine State, but it is. And again, Ryan Petty has some thoughts on this as well. So without any further ado, let's kick off the conversation with Ryan Petty. Take a look and listen. Ryan, it's good to see you again, sir. Thanks so much for coming on the program today.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to be with you on your show. It's always a great chance to catch up and chat with a good friend.
Absolutely. And boy, there's a lot of stuff going on in Florida this year, particularly when it comes to our Second Amendment rights. We have Governor Ron DeSantis, who is calling for repeal of the red flag law. And we've also seen attempts to walk back some of the other post-Parkland gun control laws that were put in place. And so let's just start there, right? I mean, what is your thought on what Governor DeSantis has been calling on lawmakers to do?
Well, first of all, let me just say I support the repeal of the provisions post-Parkland. And that may come as a shock or surprise to some folks because I was deeply involved in getting the post-Parkland school safety bill passed. In my view, certainly in retrospect, it was unfortunate that there were gun control provisions that I will say for politically expedient reasons were included in that bill. There was a need to get some Democrat votes over because for whatever reason, we just needed it to get the bill passed. And so I was concerned about raising the age from 18 to 21 to buy a long gun in the state of Florida. I expressed those concerns to the leadership in the legislature and to our then governor, Rick Scott. And the rationale behind it initially was, hey, we don't know how many more of these killers are out there between 18 and 21. We have not been doing a good job of tracking them as juveniles. We want to just take this as a safety precaution. I think I may have, if memory serves, and my memory from that time period is questionable, but it was always thought to be maybe a temporary provision, that's something that could be undone later. Well, if I had a nickel for every time a politician said something would be, temporary in nature, none of us would need Social Security, right? So anyway, the point is, it was done, I think, mostly for political expediency purposes. It's time to restore the rights of 18 to 21-year-olds who can defend their country but can't defend themselves in the state of Florida. They can't purchase a firearm to defend themselves. They can possess a long gun, but they can't purchase it. And the second provision is the repeal of the red flag laws, which, again, at the time seemed like the best solution possible because we knew at the time that we would get these tips. People would report that somebody was a danger. And it seemed like at the time, law enforcement wasn't doing anything about these things. They'd go out, they'd do a visit. The person would say the right things, the magic words, and they just let them go. And then inevitably down the road, whether it was weeks or months or even sometimes years later, these folks would end up, harming themselves or other people. And so the red flag law seemed like a really convenient, easy way to do that. You and I have talked extensively about that, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more right now. But the problem we had in Florida was something called the Baker Act, which was not something I think our sheriffs and law enforcement like to use. They found it ineffective. They would Baker Act somebody, which is a temporary civil confinement for evaluation by a mental health professional. Oftentimes, the person that was Baker Act would be in and out of that mental health facility before the law enforcement officer had finalized the paperwork. At least that's how they characterized it.
Mm-hmm.
And they said they needed another tool. They needed something better. And for whatever reason, in Florida, and I don't know the answer to this because we talked about it on the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Commission. We heard testimony about reforming the Baker Act. It was just something that didn't get done. And I think that because the sheriffs now had and law enforcement had red flag laws in Florida, and they've used them thousands and thousands of times, that the whole idea of reforming the Baker Act just fell by the wayside.
Which does not surprise me. And, one of the things that you and I have talked about in the past when it comes to red flag laws is, these are billed as mental health statutes, right? We're gonna take somebody who is a danger to themselves or others. We're going to temporarily remove their firearms. And there's sort of this supposition that, and they're going to get the treatment that they need so they're no longer dangerous. But that's not actually a part of the red flag language in any state, not just in Florida, right? Once the guns have been seized, the state essentially considers the problem to be solved. And if the individual wants to get their guns back, they might have to prove that they've gone to see a therapist, that they have, received treatment, that they are no longer a danger to themselves or others. But that's not provided. It is not something that it's not a substitute for mental health treatment. And, this is something, Ryan, I think you and I are both, I think have both become pretty cognizant about, is that, this is a mental health issue in many cases. Sometimes it's not, right? Sometimes we are simply talking about someone who's in their right mind who has terrible things planned. They're not crazy. They're not mentally disturbed. Well, they might be mentally disturbed, but they're not going to be institutionalized. They're not going to receive inpatient treatment. And in those cases, the criminal justice system is probably the most appropriate place for them. But when you talk about, suicidal ideation, when you talk about individuals who maybe are more likely to pose a threat to themselves or others, every state in this country has a shortage of mental health care providers. Almost every state in the country has a shortage of inpatient beds for people who need treatment. And you talk about the Baker Act and these people getting released before the deputies even finish their paperwork. Well, what kind of evaluation is being done? If you've got a 48 or a 72-hour hold and yet these people are out in 4 or 5 hours, are these, is there just such a crush of people that these healthcare providers are having to examine that they're not able to do the job that they're supposed to do? And are they putting people back out on the streets because they don't have the space to put people who really are a danger to themselves or others in a secure facility while they get treatment, right? That's a big topic. And all of a sudden now you're talking about lots of money getting involved, right? You got to pay for those beds. You got to pay for those workers. A red flag law is a lot easier in some regards because you don't have to build out infrastructure, right? You can rely on the existing prosecutors to handle these petitions. You don't even have to pay for a public defender because this is a civil matter. So the subject of a petition is not entitled to representation if they can't afford it. I don't want to say it's a more cost-effective solution, but I think it's a way for lawmakers in many cases, even well-intentioned lawmakers, to try to put something in, to be able to say that they've done something, right? Without costing taxpayers a lot of money, without adding to the bureaucracy in a large degree. But then again, we come back to the due process concerns. We come back to the practical concerns of, are we actually helping these people who need help? Or are we just taking their guns and sending them on their merry way where they can do harm with knives, with rope, with gasoline and matches, right? Things of that nature.
Yeah. Case in point, last night I was watching Donut Operator's YouTube channel. I'm sure many of your viewers are familiar with Donut Operator. He catalogs these incidents, police incidents. and provide some commentary as a law enforcement officer. And there was a great example of this last night on one of his videos where this officer was conducting a traffic stop when a third party walks up. And this was a gentleman that was known to law enforcement. He had attacked multiple people in a church in downtown Salt Lake City. This man comes up, starts threatening the officer. It escalates to pulling a knife, and the knife was trying to kill another third party that was doing a ride along with the police officer. So he had to pull his weapon, and unfortunately, he had to do what he had to do. And I say unfortunately because what should have happened in this case when this guy attacked these people at the church is he should have been committed. He was clearly mentally ill. He was known to law enforcement, but because, to your point, we're doing what's convenient with red flag laws, they might have taken any firearms this gentleman owned, but he owned a knife and he owned other weapons, and he was going to use them to hurt somebody. So red flag laws in my mind have become a convenient tool to say we've done something. And again, in some cases, something's better than nothing. But really what's needed is going to be two things. One is, if somebody's truly a threat and they've made threats and there's probable cause, then let's put them through the criminal justice system with all their due process rights. Let's treat it as a criminal offense, and let's figure out what precipitated it. And then let's go through the trial, and if the person requires confinement, let's confine them. Alternatively, if it is a mental health issue, let's get them into some kind of a committed treatment program. Maybe that requires some criminal justice, going through the criminal justice process, so we can commit them. But let's do the right thing for these people and society and stop taking the easy way out. We have to look no further. And I've said this 100 times. And I was just in New Orleans last week, walking down the streets where this deranged person had planted bombs and drove down the street to kill people. The only thing that would make that story a little bit better is if he'd been red flagged. And I don't know that he had, but this shows you that you can take somebody, one means of a deranged person attempting to harm another human being. You take that away from them and they will find a way. Hate and violence finds a way, I guess, is how, probably some lefty would put it. But anyway, that's the point. And until we take the proximal causes of these issues seriously and determine as a society that we're going to manage these threats through a criminal justice and mental health process, we're going to be no safer than if we didn't have red flag laws.
One of the things that I don't think is up for discussion about repeal, and I'm glad, because I think that this is something that has been working. You've talked before about the behavioral threat analysis, which is in place in Florida schools now, right? And again, this to me is a much better approach. So we see somebody who we believe is a threat, we may have evidence that they are planning something. You address that individual, right? You don't address the guns or the knives or the tools that might be in their home. You say, okay, this is the individual here, and where are the most appropriate resources for them, right? Does this rise to the level of the criminal justice system? Do we need to, put them in custody? Or is this something where, again, they need counseling, they need treatment so that they don't end up in jail, they don't end up in prison? Can we intervene at an early stage there, right? That to me is a more, I hate this word, but it's a more holistic approach. Yeah. But it's also a more practical approach. Yeah. It's a more pragmatic approach, right? Because you are dealing with, as you say, the proximate cause of concern, which is not, any guns that somebody might own or what knives are in their knife drawer. It's that individual and what's going on up here. That's the issue.
That's exactly right. Cam, I got an alert, last week a threat was made to a Florida school on social media. Homeland Security intercepted this on social media. They contacted law enforcement and the FBI. This is one of those things that has improved tremendously since Parkland. The FBI is now. I was sitting in a school safety conference 2 weeks ago with the director of the knock, where they get these where they do the intake on these threats. And the process that they run now is night and day better than it was in Parkland. I'm pleased to say they take these threats seriously. They make sure they get to law enforcement, and then there's some follow up. And that's what happened in this case. So local law enforcement got the tip. They went to this kid's home. They found the firearms that were in question. Now it turns out these were airsoft guns, but there was a threat made. It's a felony to make a threat. So the youngster was arrested, as you might imagine, and he will go through a criminal justice process. But there's an investigation going on right now, and part of that investigation, I mean, these guns look real, right, at the time, but turns out they're airsoft guns. So I don't know what's going to happen here, but the two lawyers, one representing the state and one representing this young man, are going to battle that out in court. And, I know we've got a lot of problems in our criminal justice system, but the state has an interest in protecting schools, and this young man has an interest in protecting his, freedom and liberty. He's made some mistakes. They're going to work through that and work it out. The good news is, because we do this threat management process, as you're describing, the tip came in, it was acted upon, and now we're in the management phase of this. And again, there could be penalties. I don't know what's going to happen to this young man. We take these things seriously. The fact that we take them seriously is a deterrent to others from making threats against schools in Florida. But I believe this young man is going to come out better on the other side, because his family's going to be involved. Obviously, he's got a lawyer working for him, and he's going to get the treatment that he needs, either in the juvenile justice system or by being committed to a mental health program to figure out what was going on in his life that made him thought it was that made him think, I should say, it was a good idea to threaten the school.
Yeah. All right, so let's get back to the politics of this for a second here. Again, these laws were put in place relatively, soon after Parkland, right? So they've only been on the books for going on 7 years now. Governor DeSantis obviously coming out and challenging the legislature to repeal these laws. How tough of a fight do you think that's going to be in Florida this year, Ryan?
Well, I hope it's not much of a fight at all. In fact, I believe there's at least the legislators I've talked to, there's some interest in doing this. I think with the governor's support, it certainly signals the legislature that he's willing to sign a bill if they'll put it in front of him. When I heard him describe this, he didn't put a lot of conditions on it. I think as a good leader, he just said, hey, these are the things I would like to have happen. This is the objective. We'll let the legislature work through that. Probably the most controversial piece is the open carry part of that. And, there's a bill to finally recognize open carry in the state of Florida. That one, I don't know, because there are those entrenched, it's always blamed on tourism or, the impacting tourism. That's why we don't want a bunch of people with guns running around in Orlando and scaring, families off and things like that. That's always the excuse made. And I don't know if that's actually what influences the lawmakers in the past, but I will tell you that, there's another open carry bill there. I know that gun owners are supporting that and are behind that and talking to their legislators. But I certainly think the repeal of the 18 to 21 has a very good chance of passing. I'm about 50-50 on the red flags, because the Florida Sheriff's Association, I know, will come out in support of red flag laws, or at least I believe they will if they haven't already. And they carry a lot of political weight in the legislature, and rightly so. We've got some fantastic sheriffs here. So that one's 50-50. And then the open carry, I have no idea how to handicap that one.
It is so bizarre to me that open carry is such a contentious issue in Florida, given that it's the law of the land in, the vast majority of states around the country. And it's not an issue. I mean, granted, Virginia is not the tourist mecca that Orlando is, but like there are no issues with people open carrying around King's Dominion or Busch Gardens. Like it's not an issue. So I think that is just a tempest in a teapot. And it on one hand, it amuses me, but on the other hand, we are talking about a constitutional right. So it bothers me that this has become such a line in the sand. And then you've also got the waiting period, right? So there's the 3-day waiting period that's on the books in Florida. I don't know that there's a bill that's been introduced this session to formally get rid of that. I did see that there was a bill that would, so there's already an exemption for people with concealed carry licenses. And now there's a bill that would exempt law enforcement, corrections officers, active duty military, which I'm fine with that. I just don't know why we need a waiting period in the first place. Particularly, again, if we're exempting concealed carry holders, we're exempting all these other people. Let's just say, hey, if you've got the right to keep and bear arms, you've got the right to keep and bear arms, and we shouldn't impose any sort of artificial timeout on people. But I don't know that that's going to happen this year. It may be a baby step. We add these exemptions this year. Maybe next year we go for full repeal.
Yeah, I hope so. Look, the Florida background check system runs very efficiently. It's run by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. I interact with it quite frequently as a firearms licensee. I will tell you that it's, we get these notifications back very quickly. But many of them take less than 30 seconds to get an approval. But it never ceases to make me laugh. And I know the person on the other side of the desk is laughing too. When a law enforcement officer comes in to buy a firearm from me, and they don't have their permit with them, or they can't, whatever. And so we do the 3-day dance, and I'm sitting here across from a law enforcement officer that's already carrying a firearm.
Right.
And he has to wait 3 days. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. Either we believe in our background check system and the way it works and the results that it gives us, or we don't. And there's not much. I can't say that I've ever had an approval come back with a rejection in that 3-day period. I just don't think it's doing anything to make us safer. It's doing a lot to infringe on somebody's constitutional right. There's no supporting clause in the Second Amendment that says, you have the right to keep and bear arms after 3 days. It just doesn't exist. So I'd like to see that one go too.
All right, Ryan, listen, we're going to be keeping up with what's going on with the Florida legislature this session. Would love to have you back again in the very near future. I'm glad to see that you're doing well, and I look forward to talking to you again soon, my friend.
Great to be with you, Cam. Thank you.
I always love having Ryan on the program. So glad he could be with us today. Also, tomorrow, I should let you know, we're also going to have one of our favorite folks here on Cam and Company joining the show. Stephen Gutowski from The Reload will be with us. We'll be talking about a number of things. I want to talk with Stephen about the latest NICS check figures, background checks performed in February. Pretty substantial decline, according to the National Shooting Sports Foundation. We'll also talk about Smith & Wesson versus Mexico, as well as what, if anything, we might learn and when we might learn it from Attorney General Pam Bondi, who was tasked a month ago with taking a look at all of the ATF rules and regulations, all of the DOJ policies regarding Second Amendment issues, supposed to formulate her findings with Trump's domestic policy advisor. And then presumably at some point, we will get to learn what those recommendations are. But we haven't learned them yet. So we'll be talking about that with Steve Gutowski on Wednesday's Cam and Company. Right now, let's turn our attention to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report as well. We will start there with a story out of Los Angeles. Fox News' Bill Melugin reporting that the suspects in the Los Angeles murder of a Good Samaritan who tried to stop a catalytic converter theft were in this country illegally, previously known to law enforcement, lengthy criminal records, according to Melugin. They're in Los Angeles. Wilbur Alberto Rabanales and Jose Christian Saravia Sanchez arrested by police last Thursday for the February 25th murder of Juan Miguel Sanchez. The murder caught on surveillance video. Rabanales, Melugin says, is a Guatemalan national. He's been arrested at least 15 times in the past few years in the United States, predominantly on gun charges, grand theft, burglary, and drug charges. So not trespassing, not jaywalking, things that are, fairly serious offenses. Now, we could argue whether or not nonviolent gun possession should even be a crime. But if you're in this country illegally, I think that changes things quite a bit, right? Robin Ellis also has multiple grand theft arrests, mostly for stealing catalytic converters, past charges for multiple DUIs, conspiracy, felon in possession of a firearm, possession of burglary tools, possession of methamphetamine, possession of stolen property, and felony hit and run during a police pursuit. His alleged co-conspirator, Mr. Sanchez, has been arrested at least a dozen times, according to Malugin, mostly for grand theft, also gun charges, drugs, burglary, kidnapping, possession of meth, and possession of burglary tools, according to sources. So again, at least one of these previous arrests for both of these individuals would be a violent offense. Juan Miguel Sanchez was the murder victim here, shot in the chest after he confronted these suspects while they were allegedly attempting to steal this catalytic converter. These suspects managed to escape in a car. They were later arrested at a motel about 15 miles east of Inglewood, California. Susana Sanchez, who was the victim's sister, says that her brother would have turned 49 years old on April the 4th. Speaking to Fox 11, she told the individuals who took her brother's life, "You took a big part of our heart." The family said that Mr. Sanchez had left for work before 4 o'clock that morning and wanted to get an early start at his job. He had been promoted while working to clean up after the Palisades fire. Sister said he was a big man of faith, never missed Mass on Sunday, volunteered on Sunday mornings at church, the sole provider for his family. And now he is gone. And again, allegedly, because two individuals who were in this country illegally, who had, almost 30 arrests between the two of them, were still here, not behind bars, but once again out on the streets there in Los Angeles, where, again, they allegedly and are accused of taking Mr. Sanchez's life. Now, today's armed citizen story from Wyoming, where a man in Riverton, Wyoming, who was shot by an 85-year-old homeowner is now facing a felony charge of intrusion because he was somewhere where he was not supposed to be. This actually happened last August, but a court date occurred this week yesterday on Monday. 21-year-old man from Riverton, Wyoming, was shot in the torso after wrestling with this 85-year-old homeowner. Yesterday, judge decided that the state does have enough evidence to keep prosecuting him for unlawful entry. Jeremy David Murda, I spent the past few months recovering. He's undergone multiple operations before he appeared in court on Monday. Sitting next to his defense attorney, the circuit court judge, Dan Stebner, concluded that the state did present enough evidence to prosecute Murta in the felony level Fremont County District Court. So that is where the case is being moved to. There was testimony from Riverton Police Department Detective Peter McCall on Monday's hearing. Talked about going to a home in Riverton, Wyoming, sometime after 11 p.m. on August the 9th. That's where he found Murta in the homeowner's front yard with a gunshot wound to his abdomen. At that point, by the time police had arrived, the emergency medical personnel had already shown up on scene. The 85-year-old homeowner told police that he was sitting on his couch about 6 feet from his front door when he heard a loud banging, kicking, and then yelling from the other side of his front door. So he grabbed a handgun from his bedroom and then went to answer the door. He did tell local media at the time that that was a mistake, opening the door to see what was going on. He said the guy was obviously irrational. He was saying that they sent him to my house. They said he owns my house, and I don't crazy stuff, he said. Also said that the intruder appeared drunk or under the influence of drugs. He was about 6 inches taller than the homeowner, who was about 5'3". Murda allegedly made his way into Williams' home. Williams said he tried firing off a shot with his pistol, but he had forgotten to rack a round into the chamber. The intruder then told Williams, allegedly, "Go ahead and shoot me." Williams told local media after the fact, he said, "I don't know if he was trying to commit suicide by hand or what he was doing, but he tried to push the man back outside." He said the guy was kind of uncoordinated, so they ended up kind of wrestling on the front porch. The homeowner said he believes that the intruder tripped on the front stair of his porch steps, which caused him to fall down, but he grabbed on to Williams and kind of took him down with him. Williams said, I was on top of him at that point. They're both kind of struggling to get to their feet. Williams then fired a single shot and heard the intruder say, I've been hit. So Williams, by the way, does not have any lingering issues, according to Cowboy State Daily, from the fight with the suspect. He said he was worried and concerned for a few weeks about this guy showing back up at his house, but he said that he's not as concerned about that anymore. The detective on Monday testified that when he spoke with Murda on August the 12th, 3 days after the shooting, Murda recalled that he had been drinking with family members at a local bar, started about 5 o'clock that night. It's about 6 hours before this happened. He had had beers. He had had Jägermeister. He had had some Jose Cuervo. I don't know why in God's name you would mix Jägermeister and tequila, just in general principles, but whatever. He said he went home with family members and then went back to the bar and then went back home. The affidavit says that he left his home on foot, believing that he was headed back to the bar, which is several blocks away from where the homeowner lived. Female family member said that Murda was upset when he left the home. Murda told police that he blacked out at some point, and the next thing he remembered was basically coming to with the homeowner standing over him after he had been shot. I mean, you know, listen, that may be a defense that could be raised, right? My client wasn't in his right mind. He had been drinking to the point that he was blackout drunk and was not in control of his actions. But I don't think that's a get out of jail free card. And with this case proceeding to trial and based on Murda's comments to authorities, I think the state has a pretty strong case. And I would not be surprised to see this result in a plea deal instead of going to trial. But we'll keep our eyes on any new developments out there in Fremont County, Wyoming. Finally, today, our good deed of the day, in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. A 17-year-old in Lorain, Ohio, who came to the aid of a stranger at work. This was at the Auto Zone in Lorain, Ohio. And the hero in question, Livia Goforth. She's been working at the store for about 2 months, changing headlights, brake lights, windshield wipers, checking battery and engine lights, helping customers pick out the right auto parts for their cars. It was back on February 27th when Goforth said she was outside with a customer taking a look at their vehicle when a guy walked into her store to pick up a part. She said, then she started hearing noises from inside the store. She said, I walked back in, I hear yelling, I hear screaming, and I see all of my coworkers in a corner, and I'm like, what's going on? She said that the gentleman from Cleveland had basically collapsed there. One of her coworkers was able to catch him as he fell, and Goforth said, I froze. She said, I sat there. I was panicking at first. She said, you're not prepared to deal with that working in an auto parts store. But she said something in my head clicked where I knew that I had to jump in and do something, not only because of the training that I had, but because I was the only person who was doing anything. So as it turns out, Livia Goforth had previously worked as a lifeguard in Lorain County. So she was CPR certified. And she started performing chest compressions. She turned the man on his side to prevent him from choking or hurting himself, checking for a pulse. She called 911. She called 911 while she's performing CPR. She stayed on the phone with dispatch until medical personnel arrived on scene. She says she believes she performed CPR on the man for about 10 minutes, which is amazing. She said she recalled the man breathing again twice while she performed CPR, but that his breathing was inconsistent. And then once the guy, was transported to the hospital, you don't know what happens to that individual. And that, boy, you could just be left wondering. I've had that happen. I didn't perform CPR on somebody, but I came across a car accident and helped somebody until emergency personnel arrived. And then, you just hope, right? You hope for the best, but you don't necessarily expect that you're ever going to get any answers. But Goforth says the man's daughter actually called the store about 48 hours after it happened, and she just happened to be at work. She said it was like the longest 48 hours of my life. I was stressing out. I just wanted to know if he was okay or not. And the man's daughter told her that, yeah, her father was recovering. She said he did have 6 broken ribs, but that's going to happen, quite frankly, when you perform CPR correctly. And Goforth said, I'd rather broken ribs than my life taken. She said, my lifeguard instructor always told me if you don't break ribs when you're doing CPR, you're not doing it right. She said, as soon as I started doing the first compression, I did feel his ribs break, and that was a traumatic experience. But, again, she did the right thing. And she says the experience is kind of prompted her to consider a medical career. She's thinking about going to community college for a bridge program that would help her become a registered nurse. She says her mom's a nurse. She said her great-grandmother was in the first graduating nursing class at Lorain County Community College. She says it's in the blood. So, again, in the right place, at the right time, willing, able, and capable of doing the right thing, and maybe, again, a clarifying moment about what to do in the future, not just in that moment. Olivia Goforth in Lorain, Ohio, we thank you for your very, very good deed. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I want to thank you, as always, for being a part of the program. Again, Steve Gutaski from The Reload going to be with us on Wednesday's Cam & Company. I will be on Newsmax with Carl Higby, 5 p.m. hour today. And I also want to let you know about a great event coming up next month in Massachusetts. It is the Goal Lex 250 event, celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Lexington and Concord. I'll be speaking there along with a fantastic lineup. You can find out more at goal.org/250. You definitely want to be a part of this. I'll be talking more about it in the days ahead, but goal.org/250 is where you can learn more, and I hope to see you there on April 18th. Yeah. All right. I hope to see you back here tomorrow as well. We'll talk to you soon. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.